Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. So today we're going to be talking about walking the tightrope, tips for building trust on both sides of a marketplace. So a little bit about me to start off. I'm Michelle Davey. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Wheel. And Wheel is the first and only virtual care marketplace. And today I want to talk a little bit about building trust, demonstrating credibility, developing brand equity, and all of that's much easier said than done. But it's critical for addressing many of these challenges and scaling a marketplace. I've learned these lessons time and time again, building this first and only virtual care marketplace at Wheel. So a little bit more about Wheel. We're helping companies launch and scale and sustain virtual care services all under their own brand. So Wheel is a B2B to C marketplace. And we accomplish this by building our marketplace, bringing together clinicians, so doctors and advanced practice providers and companies to help deliver virtual care. So you can see we work with a wide range of companies, including healthcare companies under traditional healthcare, digital health innovators, big tech, and Fortune 500 companies. And then on the other side of our marketplace, we have a large network of over 10,000 clinicians who are interested in working in virtual care. So trust is a key ingredient in nearly any successful relationship. It's also the key ingredient for building and scaling a healthy marketplace. Trust helps to strengthen acquisition and retention, but it also helps address the inevitable conflict of how do you prioritize one side of a marketplace versus the other. So I believe that trust is the key ingredient for building and scaling a healthy marketplace. And so today we're going to provide tangible tips and advice on why trust in a marketplace really matters, and based on my own journey at Wheel. So I'll be giving examples of how that applies here at Wheel, but also other marketplace. So takeaways from today's session, why building trust in a marketplace matters in the first place, how to build that trust in a marketplace, how to scale growth, how to maintain balance on top of the foundation of trust, and ultimately, how do we measure that trust? So today, I'm going to talk more about first, why build trust? There's a fact that we have to embrace in marketplace models. There's always going to be this challenge of the imbalance of supply and demand. In any marketplace from the beginning, that's the hardest part. How are you ultimately balancing both sides of your marketplace? So while you constantly adjust that balance, you need a tool to maintain interest, or what many of us call stickiness, in your marketplace on both sides of that marketplace. And that tool is trust. So trust creates stickiness. It does a lot more than just help with the acquisition. It also strengthens retention on both sides. So in a B2B model, on the demand side, the sales cycles are oftentimes much longer than the supply acquisition cycle. So you'll need that retention in order to balance both of those sides. So an example here at Wheel, it can take many, many months for us to bring on a new client. So go through the contracting phase to launch, and that may take some time. While it only takes a few days to weeks to kind of bring on our supply side. So we have to build that trust with our supply that the demand side is coming, and then build the trust with the demand side that the supply is there when they activate and launch on this side. So talking more in depth about the supply side, oftentimes the initial interest in your marketplace will be financial. So people want to make money via your marketplace, but monetary value isn't enough to drive retention over time. An example of this. So drivers who maybe drive for Uber and Lyft, two of the biggest marketplaces that most of us know about. Today, those companies kind of, as they grew up, really competed on price, right? So these drivers come in to drive and make money from Uber or Lyft, and the companies really drove down the price to kind of pay. So what often happened and what led to a lot of this was, drivers were switching between Uber and Lyft, oftentimes in the same ride. So now these companies are trying to elevate beyond just compensation to create that trust, but oftentimes it's too late. So imagine if Lyft or Uber started by building trust early, established kind of value outside of monetary value, thinking tax prep or umbrella benefit plans. These create stickiness outside of the monetary value. So let's dive into that more. So how do you build trust? These are in no particular order, but 4 things that I think really help build this trust. So first, add value outside of the monetary gain. So determine what you can provide that will make an impact on retention. For example, resources. So again, going into tax prep help or education. Today at Wheel, we deliver education to our clinicians to establish value outside of just the monetary value they can make at Wheel. So we educate them on what we call website manner, how to practice in virtual care, and just information about the industry as general. So thinking on the demand side, one of the ways that we establish value outside of monetary gain for our clients is really to provide more go-to-market consulting. So this can be around regulatory environment because we're in healthcare. This can be on, hey, how do you establish your first marketing campaigns to get out to the right types of consumers and patients? We don't charge for any of that. And that is because we're establishing that trust and expertise with both sides of our marketplace. So next, build confidence in your users through, again, your unique expertise and that value you can provide. So demonstrate your expertise. Find opportunities to highlight your value you're providing from the first interaction. So building off of that last example around the supply and the education that we give here at Wheel to our clinicians, training is very important, especially in a labor marketplace. So we provide training, not only Wheel training, but also what we call our Grand Rounds program, which is a peer-to-peer training. So in healthcare, really important that clinicians are learning from other clinicians. So here we can demonstrate our expertise and our value to bring together a community of clinicians, which is outside of just our core value proposition, which is monetary gain. On the demand side, it's much harder to develop trust inside of enterprises. So there's so many stakeholders and influencers and decisions to engage with you. And large enterprise customers, you may have 5 to 10 different people that you're trying to navigate, what values they have. So it's important to kind of do this exercise and determine who your stakeholders are first and foremost, and then carefully consider what they individually care about the most. Is that training and education? Is that go-to-market strategy? Is it financial? So understanding what that value is so you can ultimately demonstrate your expertise and value that you can bring to them. This one may not be for every marketplace, but I wanted to bring it up as I think it's actually a powerful tool, and we're seeing it more and more with marketplaces. So creating a feeling of exclusivity within a marketplace. When you make it challenging to enter, there's this prestige about being in that network, about being a part of the marketplace. And oftentimes it creates a barrier to exiting. So you've created and worked so hard to get here. Why would you leave? An example of that here at Wheel is our low acceptance rate. So out of all of the clinicians that apply here at Wheel, we only accept 1 out of 10. We have a rigorous interviewing process and credentialing process. So when you're on the platform, it has a feeling of not only the best of the best work on this platform. So not only does it create trust and community within the clinicians, it also creates trust on the other side of the market with our demand. That is something we'll talk more about in the upcoming slides, but ultimately creating trust between those two user groups. Last but definitely not least, one of the most important things is set expectations early and often. So if you're just starting to build your marketplace, one of the fastest ways you can gain trust is by communicating clearly and being transparent. Early days in a marketplace, as you're struggling with that imbalance of supply versus demand versus one side versus the other, oftentimes you're going to be imbalanced, and that's okay if you communicate those expectations and be transparent with your user base. So again, using something here at Wheel, an example. So we have to be really clear on how long the process takes from start to finish, both with our supply and our demand side. So both with our clinicians and our clients, we have to talk about the length of time for clinicians that it takes to go through training and education and credentialing and licensure. How long does that take? But also, how long will it take them to get to work, to gain that monetary value that they're coming into the marketplace for? And on the demand side, we'll have to talk to them about what are the steps that they have to take in order for us to ultimately launch them so that they can get out into patients. So clearly communicating timelines, but also expectations from each user base. What do they need to know and what do they need to do in order to engage in the marketplace? Super important. We've seen marketplaces do this by creating widgets. We've seen marketplaces do this well by creating clear onboarding flows for both sides of their marketplace. So really important here. Next, we'll talk about how to scale growth and maintain the balance within a marketplace, something that we all in marketplaces talk a lot about and struggle with, and in any given time that's moving. So you've invested in building trust on either side of your marketplace, and now what? What do you do now? First and foremost, you should figure out your flywheel. Determine that key metric that makes the whole marketplace grow and function. Keep an eye on the ball and everything will balance over time. So what is that main KPI? What is that main thing that everyone's coming in for, ultimately to help both sides of the marketplace balance? The next step is to build trust between the two sides of the marketplace. So as I discussed earlier, not only is it important to build trust between one side, foundationally with yourself, but also how do we create trust between those two user bases? So the trust you've built serves as a really helpful, solid foundation to make sure those interactions go smoothly amongst the two sides. But at some point in the evolution in your marketplace, you have to step back and empower those two sides to directly interact with each other or to build their trust directly. You also need to create these systems and processes to make sure there is organic trust between the two once you've taken a step back. So an example, using Lyft again, passengers getting into a Lyft car. We have to create trust between those two user groups. So one way Lyft and Uber do that is they know that that driver has been vetted and screened and fingerprinted. And you can also see their rating on your app. So that passenger has trust that that driver is a safe driver, one that's going to get them to their destination. So again, building trust between the users. And wheel example. So wheel clients have to trust that clinicians are going to provide excellent care. So they have to trust that they know our team has properly vetted these clinicians, trained these clinicians, and enabled them to provide high quality care. So again, establishing trust between our two user bases. Um, and last, providing a clear vision, both internally and externally, on how to balance and prioritize. So this one's a super important lesson for me. As we started Wheel, our mission statement was to be clinician first. So we have to be really mindful of our mission statement, how we talk about the company, and how it could potentially lead to an imbalance in the marketplace. Determine if your core value that brings these two sides together, and how do you build empathy for both sides. So again, we started out with a mission here at Wheel to be clinician first, still our mission. But what we talk about internally is that that doesn't mean we can neglect the other side of our marketplace, our companies and our clients. We keep clinicians happy by providing them with regular work. Again, going back to the monetary value, which means we have to invest in building demand through the client side. Etsy has a very interesting take on this as well, if you think about an example for them. So early on, Etsy was focused on their makers. But if you can imagine, the makers are coming on to sell their crafts and their goods online, again, that monetary value. And so without the buyer side, the makers don't stay on the platform. Nobody's there to interact. So they then started concentrating on the buyers as well to make sure that marketplace was always in balance, to create that retention on both sides. So not only is it important to build trust internally, but also how you communicate is super important, both internally and externally to your market. So how should you measure trust in your marketplace? To be honest, this one's a little bit hard to do. Each marketplace has its different KPIs, and over time, you'll learn how to determine how you can measure the health of your marketplace. So there's KPIs like churn, retention, number of user interactions, NPS. All of those are helpful, but they can also be pretty surface level indicators. So you really got to figure out what your leading indicator is that show the marketplace is working. Oftentimes that comes from your flywheel of what is keeping everything in balance. So for us, it's the number of patient visits between a clinician and a patient per client. So a very structural two wheel in particular, but Lyft or Uber, an example of that may be the number of rides coming in, because both the supply side, the drivers are happy if they're getting rides, and then the users are happy and it's clearly working, that flywheel is working if they're requesting rides there. Something we've found super helpful in measuring this trust is going beyond that surface level indicators of KPIs and kind of staying in the loop with our market. So soliciting feedback, whether that's through surveys or customer interviews, really getting anecdotal feedback to kind of measure that trust, to understand how deep is that trust, and keeping a pulse on that trust over time in your marketplace. So I hope that's helpful. I would love to hear from you. We have about 5 minutes, so I'll go now to some questions from the audience. So one of the questions is that at Secondra, the idea was to build a marketplace with unprecedented trust. what do you think about onboarding as an enabler for building trust at first touch? Great question. I think onboarding is a really important thing on both sides of your marketplace to develop trust. So again, going back from everything to communication style, how you're onboarding in a way that is simple, but also over communicating maybe the steps and how long each onboarding step is going to take. I also think that trust is established when you can help these sides of the market and your user base go through an onboarding experience that is somewhat personalized to them. So oftentimes marketplaces or onboarding experiences, have the consumer fill out their first name and then use that name throughout the onboarding experience. That builds innate trust in the onboarding experience. I think you can really think of many different ways to build trust throughout the onboarding experience. But again, that first touch is super important because that's your first sign to build trust. That's your first way to really tell that consumer and that user exactly who you are as a marketplace to develop that trust early and often throughout the process. The next question, it's always most difficult to onboard the first supplier in the marketplace. How can you convince the first one to join? They usually prefer to wait for others first. This is a great question and something we struggle with here at Wheel because we are a completely white labeled marketplace. So we actually don't talk about our clients at all. I think, as I said, building trust on the enterprise side or your client side or supplier side is oftentimes the hardest, especially with the first one. So there's ways to do this. Oftentimes, again, it's developing value outside of the monetary value that you're already going to bring to them. So you can talk to them all day about ROI. You can create discounts for being first beta user testers and things like that. But it's really about how do you establish trust as yourself, as the company, to those users, especially those first users, super important. So sometimes you have to go a little bit above and beyond, give that white glove experience and bring that expertise that you have for that market to them. So one of the ways we did this early was that we brought our regulatory expertise and our expertise around onboarding and things like that. We brought that to clients completely free. We also developed trust by having trusted advisors or people in the industry who backed the company, who were able to talk about the trust that we had created. So that's one way that we hadn't talked about, but using expertise in the industry to also create trust for those suppliers. The next question here, how do you think about building trust between two sides versus your customers building trust in the platform, you? Yeah, so going back to, let me see if I can scroll through the slides really fast. Empowering both sides to build trust with each other. Again, this is really important. I think as you mature, this becomes more and more important in a marketplace. So again, I think it's really about how you're providing value to the two sides, but then showing them that they can have trust in each other. That will look different in every marketplace, but again, the Lyft example around, knowing that that driver's screen embedded. I think, one of the ways that doing that is having quality scores or rating scores. So oftentimes you have 5 stars or reviews of some sort. That way you can create some level of trust in the marketplace between the users. One more question as we're out of time. I think I answered them all. So thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it. I hope you all have some takeaways today about how to build trust, why it's important, and then lastly, how to measure it. It is the foundational part of building a healthy marketplace. So I encourage you all to go out and think about how that applies to your company and how you can build trust today with your user bases. Thank you.